back inside the secret Gibby headquarters for another edition of Gibby's Football Podcast. I'm your host, Zach McGibbon. The last episode of Gibby's Football Podcast for 2022. I'm not going to scare you like that. It's not ending. Just because I missed an episode last week doesn't mean I'm going to just continue to miss episodes. Not this close to the end of the season. But the way that this next couple of hours could go on this recording with this guest on, maybe the podcast may have to end. Because against my own judgment, I've brought on my executive producer for life for This Is Wrestling. Of course, host and producer on TSN 1200, CF4A, a whole litany of other programs. I have on with me Steve Bunda. Bunda, how are you doing today, buddy?
Well, I want to first off state that I think I know where your broadcast location is. I will not give it away for the good listeners, okay. But I will state that I don't think it's as secretive as it is.
Okay.
He does it in Florida, I think. But it's good to be back, friggin'. I was talking to my fellow executives earlier this morning in our executive meeting. And when I say that, I mean the executive producer of this show, which is Chris Hulkolski. He's pretty good at his job. And Samantha Pope, the executive director of This Is Wrestling. We usually just plot out ways to find a way to make your podcast better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was unaware of these executive meetings. They sound super secret. Sounds like a cult, really. But I need to know what gets discussed. Is it just mainly like content of the show? Is it just me in general? Like, what gets discussed on these executive meetings?
Yeah, the only problem with that is you're not an executive, so I could not tell you what goes on in these meetings because sometimes it, not sometimes, about 98% of the time, it revolves around what you're up to, what you're doing, and also the fact that you're secretly Hornswoggle. So we'll have to keep a lot of the executive meeting material down. But those three things, we're trying to make sure, one, finances, because we have to help you out a lot with whether it's counting a school, writing school for how you spell certain things. And we also put you through wrestling camp every once in a while, so that way you can work on your fisherman suplex.
Yes, I have been working on my bridge recently on the fisherman suplex, so I think
that's hard on the back, eh?
It is really tough, especially the lower spine. It hurts a lot. And so I think, the wrestling school is going to pay off. I think I'll be in the ring sooner rather than later. I'm gonna take exception to the Hornswoggle comment because this is the second straight episode where I've been mentioned as Hornswoggle, and I thought with this being a football podcast, this would be a safe haven from the Hornswoggle accusations. Trying to get myself away from those accusations, but they continue to dog me. They continue to follow me around, Mr. Bunda.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Trailer Park Boys. And at one point, Mr. Leahy says you can't change the spots on a leopard. I'll clean it up a bit for the podcast. Well, you can't can't take the swoggle out of you.
Well, it sounds like that's the case. I just cannot dodge these accusations. One day, I told Danny T, who was on the last episode, this as well. But one day, Hornswoggle and I are going to meet. We're going to shake hands. We're going to take a photo of the handshake, very much Mega Power style, and we're going to break the internet. And I'm looking forward to that day when it happens.
Oh, well, it'll be weird because it's going to be like Photoshop. So maybe you try and get a video in so some people believe you, or the actor that you have pretending to be Hornswoggle is, don't have him on IMDb or anything like that. Make sure he's not very well known so people can't Google him. But I understand your plan. And shout out to Chris Olsky for doing such a good job on this podcast that I forgot to mention is F the Gamecocks.
That's right. Yes, another liberty you guys have taken with my show is that each week it will be the changing of the opponent for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We will talk some college football at the end of the show because there's a lot of bowl games going on. We are currently in the middle of bowl season, but some of the biggest bowl games will be happening over the next couple of days. So another liberty you've taken with the podcast, just continuing to rename the show. But one of the people as well that oversees this show, doing two podcasts at once, is Samantha Pope, who is not only the executive director of This Is Wrestling, but also the general manager of this very show, Gibby's Football Podcast. And I think we could transition this because Sam Pope's favorite football team is the Denver Broncos. And there's a lot going on with the Denver Broncos. Let's just start off right there with the firing of Nathaniel Hackett, Nathan Hackett, whatever you want to call him. He's gone. Didn't even make a full season in his first season. He got Urban Meyered in a way. Maybe not as bad as Urban Meyer, but still not great.
He kicked the kicker?
Yeah, he didn't kick a kicker, as far as we know. He certainly relied on his kicker a lot, especially in that first game against the Seahawks. But no, Hackett is gone. A disaster of a season for the Denver Broncos, and we haven't even finished this season yet. Just quickly, your thoughts on the firing of Hackett and a look at the Denver Broncos themselves, where they stand as a franchise. And, a lot of talk about Russell Wilson and that contract are already talking about maybe trying to find a way to abandon ship and take on a whole bunch of dead money because of it. Just a look at the Nathaniel Hackett firing and your thoughts on it.
Well, I guess they just couldn't hack it, right? In Denver?
I
Terrible.
was waiting for it. I was waiting for that pun.
Yeah, low-hanging fruit. And we get into these situations where so often we quickly rush to have offensive coordinators that deal with good quarterbacks or great offensive systems, right? The NFL has always been such an offensive-oriented league, last 20 years, basically, since, you go back to those early years, the, Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2002 with Brad Johnson, 2000 with the Baltimore Ravens and Trent Dilfer, but those teams that were more known for the defense. Now we've become obsessed with these offensive coordinators, and what Hackett did in Green Bay for a couple of years that got him this position, obviously didn't hack it in Denver, right? It's terrible, but I'm going to keep using that one because it's unreal. But no, you see the way he worked, and Denver is a team that, everybody argued they were built to have a quarterback go in there and an offensive guy to go in and set this team up to battle in their division. And quite frankly, they fell on their face. And whether it's Russell Wilson's fault, Nathaniel Hackett's fault, you brought up the game against Seattle when it just showed how inexperienced he was with managing the clock, not going for it a couple times. But there was a lot of that happened throughout the year. But quite frankly, sometimes just good coordinators are good coordinators, and they aren't meant to be coaches. I'm not here to, crucify Hackett on being, never a head coach, but quite frankly, there's just obviously something going on there. And I guess they lost Javonte Williams early in the year, which took away from their running game a little bit. But when you watch that Denver Broncos team, every once in a while, I think you said Sam Pope was a fan, but I think that's her second favorite team. I know she's a Bucs fan, but I know she does like the Broncos as well. But they were just for a team that has so many skilled guys in Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, who's been injured for some of the year. They have Noah Fant. They used to have him. He went to Seattle in that trade, but they added a lot of guys that were like, okay, all we need is Russell Wilson. Now, I don't know who you want to blame in this. I'm going to blame Hackett because I kind of like Russell Wilson a little bit. And I don't know too much about Nathaniel Hackett, but he obviously didn't do a good enough job there with new ownership and the money that they just gave to Russell Wilson. Feel like they were going to go on the side of Russell Wilson quickly before just going out there and getting rid of the quarterback that they literally just paid a crap ton of money from. I think they own Walmart or whatever. Yes. But either way, the Broncos owners, it's, one of the first, I guess, after week 12. It's not Black Monday, but it's a little early because there's only a couple weeks left. But I was a little surprised to see it happen so quickly before the season ended.
Yeah, I thought that Hackett would last the season, but definitely get fired by the end of the season. So this sort of move was definitely surprising. I think for me, what really kind of stood out for me is that Hackett didn't really call the plays in Green Bay when he was the offensive coordinator. That was all LaFleur. And I think that's kind of what exposed him as well. And obviously, a lot of talk about managing a game and time clock management. They hire a coach to try and fix that. I wonder what happened to that coach, by the way. But I look at that, and I think as soon as we saw the story of come out about trying to hire a coach to help him with that, I think it was pretty clear that maybe Hackett is just not the guy for the job. And really, when you look at his previous coaching experience, even before Green Bay, when he was an offensive coordinator for other teams like the Jaguars, I believe he was for a time, he didn't really coach these high-level offenses either. These weren't like top 10 offenses he was coaching. So I think really it was just sort of a recipe for disaster. I also just hold on to the belief that Hackett was in there because they wanted to get Aaron Rodgers. They thought they could get Aaron Rodgers, so why not bring his coach over to make him happy? And when they couldn't get Aaron Rodgers, well, let's get the next best thing. Let's get Russell Wilson, an all-pro quarterback, to really turn this team around, and Hackett will figure it out. But nonetheless, Hackett is gone, and still some talk about Russell Wilson. We mentioned a little bit earlier. I think it's too early to say that this is going to go down as the worst trade ever. I think I'm going to give it another year. We'll see with the new coach and everything. And you mentioned some of the injuries as well. Javonte Williams, Tim Patrick before the season even started as well, tearing his ACL. That was also a big blow. So I'm willing to give Russell Wilson a chance, but it was pretty clear to me watching him play that the guy does not like throwing down the middle of the field. Just has a fear of throwing down the middle of the field. He likes to throw on the sides and tries to throw deep a lot. It's very hero ball that Russell Wilson's doing a lot of right now. It's just weird to see him do that because usually he's been a much more efficient passer. So I don't know what's sort of changed in his mindset where he has to play this hero ball all of a sudden all the time. And that was really evident in the Rams game over the Christmas holiday weekend. But nonetheless, I continue on with Russell Wilson. If you're the Broncos, there's a lot of talk about the different coaching candidates out there. Sean Payton's name is being floated around a lot. Dan Quinn, he was previously a head coaching candidate for the Broncos last season, probably will be another candidate this season, and has worked with Russell Wilson before. Kind of looking at everything, is do you have like an early favorite for new head coach of the Broncos, or you still want to give it another couple of weeks and let the playoffs play out before we get a real clear favorite?
Yeah. For one, I think we'll have to wait a little bit because Sean Payton, and I think that's why Denver did this by, firing Hackett, a couple weeks before, is to have these conversations behind the scenes right now with Sean Payton, who the reports are already out there that he's, I believe, going for Vic Fangio to join his coaching staff, and he's building his quote unquote all-star coaching staff, which, I kind of hate Sean Payton when his days the Saints, but we hate the Saints. So either way, you look at that, and I think the biggest thing is we're going to start seeing more, coaches get fired. It's going to be the next couple of weeks here, but there is Black Monday, which is usually the first day, the Monday after the last week of the season in the NFL, where you see 2 to 3 coaches, at least get fired. I'm not sure how many we'll have this year, but the one that I think a lot of people saw coming was this one. I'm curious to see a couple more, but availability, for me and what they were doing, I'm curious to see if they try and go and poach someone from Seattle, because it just seemed like whatever happened with Russell Wilson, you look at the stats, and I think I read that he barely scrambled and used his feet on the majority of his plays, which is something he was kind of known for in Seattle, as, he can get himself out of trouble. It's like he went to Denver, he signed his big money deal. Oh, by the way, it was a 5-year extension, $242 million deal with 161. That's 161 million guaranteed, to be a very average, like you said, playing hero ball. He has weapons. I feel like there's still something there, and you obviously can't give up on that just yet with a contract like that. You're going to be sitting through dead cap through the next 67 years at least. But I do believe that there is going to be a good amount of coaches that would like to work in that environment, because, like I said, that defense is solid. And I think that their offense is right there. I'm curious to see if Sean Payton, who is an offensive-minded coach, he's worked with Drew Brees before, he's coming back for, a run at coaching, I believe, because he saw that New Orleans is in dog crap and that they have dead cap, I don't know, like $60 million at the beginning of every offseason. So he wanted to get out of there, get himself a quarterback in certain situation, and find his best spot. I believe he's going to sit there and wait and see, have conversations behind the scenes, but I do want to wait a little bit more, because I think we still have some college coaches that could get, a chance maybe in the NFL, but also that we'll see a lot of coordinators, and we're going to see a lot of success throughout the playoffs, obviously. But that's the thing. These offensive-minded coaches or defensively, Dan Quinn, like you said, the Cowboys is one of the only, well-known defensive-minded coach in there that has once been a head coach with the Atlanta Falcons for a good couple of years, but that, like I said, I don't know why teams love the offensive-minded coaching, and it's certainly the sexy thing to do. But at the end of the day, you look at that team and the coaches they've had the last couple of years, and it hasn't done what they want. And they have a lot of pieces. And you look at the AFC West. I don't know, going into the season, I think, we both looked at that as one of the best divisions in football. The Raiders haven't been good. The Broncos have just been terrible. I would have never expected them to have 4 wins. I don't remember who I had winning that division, but, it's funny to see how, those two teams with all the star power, all the quarterback power that is in the AFC West kind of just fall on its face.
Yeah, the AFC West, it was really hyped up coming in. I may have been part of that hype as well. But,
Me too.
I mean, it was looking really good, some of the moves that were coming in. And yeah, you mentioned with the Broncos, just an absolutely dreadful season. The Raiders as well. We'll talk about those Raiders in a second. I mean, it was funny. You looked at all these moves, and the Chiefs didn't really do that much in their off season, and yet here they are. Probably, I believe, have won the division, and so it's quite something there. So that's the Broncos. Hopefully, Sam Pope does not think we were unfair to the Broncos or have been too mean to the Broncos. I'm sure it would be discussed in the executives meeting for you, Mr. Bunda. But nonetheless, Broncos country, let's ride.
Yeah, I'd be more worried if it was their favorite team, but I think it's only their second, so it's not a big deal.
If it's the Bucks, then it's a big deal. Then it's a major deal.
I don't know if we have enough time to touch on our Bucks right now, friggin', because I might lose my mind.
Well, we'll talk about the Bucks in a second. We'll talk about them in the playoff picture because that NFC South is just wide open right now. Which
smells a bit stinky in here. I don't know if it was me or no. It smells like the division.
Yeah, no, it's the division. It's definitely the division. But we're gonna stay in the AFC West though, because definitely want to talk about the Raiders benching Derek Carr this upcoming 2 games. So for the rest of the season, it's obviously you want to see what you got in Jarrett Stidham. Obviously, I mean, he's clearly the guy you want to get some looks, not because there's an injury clause or anything like that. You want to try and save him so that he looks good in a potential trade in the offseason. Definitely not that. Derek Carr, benched. Your thoughts on the move, and do you see him leaving Las Vegas?
Yeah, I don't know. One, I'm angry because I was in the semifinals of a fantasy matchup and he only got me 8 points over the weekend. So I lost, and that was for big money. I would have went to, the money position. I was pretty upset. He basically ruined his 8 points, ruined TJ Hawkinson's 35-point effort for me. So I was a little upset about that. But no, you look at that situation and another team that has went all in, and I'm not sure I buy a lot of what's going on, whether it's McDaniel not looking very good again in a coaching position, but, the amount of money that they gave to Devontae Adams to make sure he was the highest paid receiver. And it's like, oh, man, this is our quarterback and receiver duo that we saw back here a couple of years ago for Fresno State. And now it's like they're going to rekindle that magic. And it's like they haven't even made a full season. And they're already benching him because there's a clause that if he's released, 3 days around the Super Bowl, within 3 days of the Super Bowl, and he's healthy, that they get out of it. I think it's $5 million, and his contract's not guaranteed. Like you said, it's just kind of weird and very Raider-esque. Jarrett Stidham, I don't know. I feel like I've seen enough of him back at West Virginia, and I think Auburn. He went to Auburn after for a bit.
Yep.
But not much to see there. And I actually believe he played with the Patriots.
Yep.
Like, I don't think he's ever started, but he's always been. I think it's his first career start. But just interesting. Again, out of the division race for a playoff spot, but very much a team that was in it throughout most of the year. Again, I'm not sure I put a lot of their fault on Derek Carr. For the reason why the Raiders are only at, what is it? What are they, 6-9?
Yes, 6-9.
6-9, and it's like I'm not going to put it all on them. I don't believe we saw a lot from Josh McDaniels and his coaching staff, and a lot of head scratching moves. So I might chalk this up to this could be a bad move. And look, their first couple, I think, lines were that we're just going to do it to trade him. Keep our options open, I believe, is what Jeremy Fowler said.
Yes.
When I was reading that today, which options open. Okay. Maybe it's a scare tactic. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he lives in a house with his neighbors, John Gruden, in Vegas somewhere. when he was hired as the head coach. So that's going to be an awkward spot for both of them to be living in their neighborhood and, drinking coffee on their front porch, yelling at the kids riding scooters and on the rollerblades playing, road hockey, because, Vegas Golden Knights are a much better team than the Raiders the last couple of years. So
Definitely.
They're going to be arguing. Remember that time in Vegas we both got canned and we both signed some crazy extensions?
Yeah, both got canned for completely different reasons. As long as they don't exchange email addresses, I think thing should be okay. But this is pretty clear to me that Derek Carr is on his way out of Las Vegas. I'm a little disappointed that Davante Adams statistically, if you just kind of looked at it on paper, he's having a really productive season. It's just, as you mentioned, it's like, I think it's also just the ghosts of Gruden and Mayock past with just how horrid the draft classes were. And Josh Jacobs is likely on his way out too. I don't know if you saw his locker room comments after the game Sunday, but it was pretty clear that it's pretty clear that he's of the mindset he's probably on the way out. And so you just kind of look at the Raiders right now, and I think it's going to have to be back to square one. And, you talk about, in the case of Derek Carr, like certain contract stipulations. Well, I think Raiders fans will have to get used to Josh McDaniels for a while, considering may not be as much money in the Raiders as one would hope in order to eat up Josh McDaniels' contract. But just not a good season for the Raiders. I think you're going to see a lot of rebuilding going on there. And try and save as much of the draft class as they can. And it was really pointed out, it's like, man, they got nothing out of the Mac deal many years ago. Got all those picks and really nothing came of it. Just a total waste. And I just looking at that franchise, you have to look at them as one of the more how do I want to say it? Terribly run franchises in the league. They're not very well run.
No, they're right there with those Cleveland Browns as well, where, when you're constantly trading to gain draft picks, you're not drafting well, you're just pretty much giving players away because so often it just doesn't pan out. And for the Raiders, they're in a spot where, like you said, Gruden and Mayock, those years of drafting and, reaching for random players and, drafting players that were, nowhere near where they should have been drafted. I look back, I think it was Colton Miller, was it? One of their tackles.
Yep.
Josh Jacobs drafted in the first round running back, which I'm not going to completely crap on because he has been probably their best player other than Davante Adams, but especially this year, he's had a crazy season. But, you go back through the draft class and, I can't remember was it Damon Arnett who's flashing guns and he got cut for flashing gun videos of people trying to get into his house. And they've never been a good judge of character, and we're all about football players. And you get into that point where you're just doing it for the wrong reasons, and it's come back to bite them in the ass. And quite frankly, I don't know if Derek Carr is a bona fide number one quarterback in the NFL. I don't put a lot of it on him, but he has regressed quite a bit this year. And this was the year, like we said, we expected a lot more from the AFC West, but the Raiders in general, like it was almost a coin toss. You went into the season, which throw it, a dart at the dartboard, and whatever team you land on, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to win that division because there was a pretty stacked division. The Chargers, you could even say, I'm a little disappointed in them. I thought they'd be, right there with the Chiefs, but the Chargers are, right there at 9-6, but still more of a team that I wanted to see more from Justin Herbert. So this division was just such a very underwhelming division. And Derek Carr, I don't know what his future is. If he gets traded somewhere, curious to see who and if it's a backup role or if it's a starter's role or if he just gets outright cut. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen here. Something tells me he's going to get outright cut because as soon as you ever see players go on this, well, he could be traded. Trades don't happen in the NFL. They just don't. And anyone that wants him is probably like, yeah, just cut him. We'll sign him that way. This doesn't make any sense. So I assume he's the dead man walking. I'm curious to see what they do in the draft and how they handle the Josh McDaniels situation. But they have I don't think they have a very good cap situation moving into next offseason. So let's just, if you can't build through the draft, I think we've all seen it. You're pretty much shooting yourself in the foot because you need to rely on those, especially first round picks, but your 5-year contracts. But, you need those rookie contracts to come through with your big moments when you're paying guys like Devontae Adams, $20-something million a year, almost $30 million a year.
Yeah. Totally. And that's a great point you make as well. I always get a kick out of like when there's reports that come out of being like, well, he could be traded if they get something, but he'll also could be cut. It's like, well, he's getting cut then. Like a team's not going to look at that. It's like, oh my God, we got to give up a draft pick for him. Like, you know what I mean? It never happens. Never, ever happens. So it's a great point you make there. So the Raiders just occupying the bottom. If it wasn't for the Broncos just being an absolute tire fire, they're probably last. Because looking at the playoff picture, we'll get to it in a moment because there's one other news item I want to get to. They're still technically not eliminated for playoff contention. They're still in there. So maybe Jarrett Stidham is the guy to get them there. But
wouldn't that be a story?
That would be something else. I would pay good money to see that. But
that, I have a question for you. Is whenever we get into these weeks of the year, and if you ever check the standings or you watch an NFL show, they start to pay attention. They'll bring up like how this team could make the playoffs.
Yes.
And it's honestly, I always laugh because it's so funny because some of the things like you need like the Colts and the Jags to tie, you need to win, and you need the Saints to lose. And it's like, oh, and like you have to have like another team lose for strength of schedule.
Yes.
It's just those scenarios always kill me that everybody knows that, well, the Raiders are basically out of it, but technically not. So you go to the standings and you just check this out, and it's just so funny. Wins tiebreak over Tennessee and Pittsburgh based on best percentage in conference games. Division tiebreak was initially used to eliminate the New York Jets, and that's how the Patriots can make the playoffs.
Yeah. It's all, I mean, especially now with betting being legalized, like you're going to see some people being like, oh, I like those odds. I'm putting money on that. I'm going to put some money on that. Let's go and put big money. And
Jarrett Stidham's whole family is putting money on it.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. But one last quick thing before we talk about the playoff picture, I want to quickly talk about JJ Watt. He announced that he's going to retire at the end of the season, played his last home game for the Cardinals. And now is going to play on the road for the last 2 games of the season. JJ Watt, first ballot Hall of Famer in my mind, just a stud defensive lineman, and on some just some bad teams with the Texans and now the Cardinals, and deserved a lot more in his career in terms of playoff success, but in terms of just on the field, I think just a really one of the better defensive players of this era. And if injuries didn't slow him down, he could be right up there in terms of the all-time great defensive players. He was just that dominant on the field.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And everybody, looks back at his career. And, I think one thing too, he's so well known for just being that guy off the field.
Yep.
Right. Like he's such a good dude. He's always on social media. He's always trying to help people out. When Houston went through the floods, he was very much right there helping out as much as he can, donating money, doing everything he could to help out that community. And, I think he does go down as like we always talk about, like, these players that just didn't win Super Bowls. And, it's so often it's like offensive guys, quarterbacks or receivers. But we forget about guys like JJ Watt, who like, at times, like I'll go back. I had a stats up here for one of the years where he won Defensive Player of the Year, but 20.5 sacks, 29 tackles for a loss, 4 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recovery, 1 for a touchdown, an interception return for an 80-yard touchdown. This is a defensive lineman we're talking about, an 80-yard touchdown. He won the Defensive Player of the Year. He was an All-Pro. Oh, yeah, and he had 3 touchdown catches because people forget that he was also a tight end before this. But, that was his 2014 season, and, just a monster. But another thing I think is funny, I bring up the 3 touchdown catches. J.J. Watt was a 2-star recruit out of high school. He went to Central Michigan. This is a guy that was a tight end and converted to a defensive lineman by walking on at Wisconsin. So he ended up leaving Central Michigan because he was unhappy with the way the offense used him as a tight end. He went home, he attended community college, delivered pizzas, and walked on at Wisconsin to not only then become an All-American, number 11 pick in the draft, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, and now he's an absolute future Hall of Famer. It's a guy that, every time hockey season comes around, he tweets out a picture of himself playing hockey, loves hockey, Wisconsin guy, absolute beauty of a dude. But just to think of like everything about this guy, like he's persevered his whole career. He's never stopped. It's just so admiring. Like I said, just one of those guys that just on the field and off the field, such a good dude. Like you said, absolute Hall of Famer. Darren Rovell was the one that tweeted out that little story about him at Central Michigan. We're pretty much leaving as a tight end. It's like, yeah, we understand he played tight end, but just so cool to see the story of him and to read some of the season stats. That 2014 season was just monster of a year. So sad to see him go without winning anything meaningful. You know, you'll think back to the picture where he's got the broken nose and his face is all bloody and he's just coming off the field and he's a monster. The Ray Rice soundbite when you go back years ago where he told him that he's eating burritos bigger than him. Yes. He's like a funny guy that can chirp, but just such a good dude on the field. You know, so many highlights I've been watching, you know, just, well, I guess if we've seen since he's announced his retirement. You know, I know the Bucs just played the Cardinals, so watching them in that game, absolutely terrorized that terrible offensive line that the Bucs have right now. He's still got it. Wish him nothing but the best, but yeah, I kind of, you know, you got him and Larry Fitzgerald, two Cardinal players that I kind of wanted to see win Super Bowls because they're just well known as great guys both on the field and off. And you know, I guess we saw Larry Fitzgerald already retire, but now to see JJ Watt go out like this when they were, you know, the Cardinals were expected to have that big year with Kyler Murray, and here's DeAndre Hopkins after a 6-game suspension, and I know they dealt with some injuries. They brought in Marquise Brown, and they just absolutely fell on their face too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a lot there that I think back as well. I got a kick out of the Freezing Cold Takes account, retweeting old 2011 NFL draft takes about Nick Fairley. The Houston Texans fans wanted Nick Fairley to go to the Houston Texans instead of JJ Watt, and how they blew it. Oh, it was so great because I remembered that at the time too. People were like, "Oh, we don't know about JJ Watt. Like Nick Fairley's the safer pick," and Nick Fairley's not a bad player, but I mean, JJ Watt, like that's it. That's all you really have to say. And then also too, you just kind of look back at that 2011 draft itself and just some of the stud players that came out of that draft. Oh, yeah. Not just JJ Watt, but of course, as a Cowboys fan, I have to mention Tyron Smith getting drafted in there, and obviously the first overall pick, Cam Newton, Von Miller, AJ Green, Patrick Peterson, Julio Jones. I mean, the list goes on, and so
I can't help but notice you left two names off that list.
What two names did I leave off the list?
Would one be Super Bowl winning quarterback with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Blaine Gabbert? Also, Jake Locker.
I thought you were going to say Christian Ponder too. I mean, he was also in that draft. Maybe
Why
not for
Ponder
passing. That's right.
Yeah.
Always go with AP in that situation. But yeah, JJ Watt retiring, a tremendous career. And for what we got on the field, it was pretty impressive. It was something else. And you mentioned some of those years. I mean, that 1 year alone you were mentioning, I was just hearing the stats, and it's like, man, this guy's dominant. It's just a damn shame that the Texans never were really able to build a really good team other than JJ Watt to really lead to some deep playoff success.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, speaking of the playoffs, let's take a look at the playoff picture as we stand here. We're getting close to the end of the season, and it's still pretty much up for grabs at a bunch of spots. Really now just kind of figuring out who's going to win some divisions. I know for your team, it's going to be pretty key to try and win that division. But we'll first start with the AFC. We'll save your team. We'll save your team. We won't criticize the Bucs yet.
Our team.
Our team, sorry, my bad, of course. Our team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's just kind of take a look at the standings right now. And so really the one division that is still up for grabs is the AFC South. It could be Tennessee land. It could be Jacksonville. Jacksonville is currently the one occupying the spot. I mean, we're kind of looking at it right now. We're recording before the Thursday night game against the Dallas Cowboys for the Tennessee Titans. The Jaguars have been turning around a little bit, and Trevor Lawrence is coming into his own, and he's really been putting on a tremendous feat of games. And of course, I had to see one of those games as a Cowboys fan, the big comeback, and I was not mad at all. Didn't have to take a walk afterwards to try and calm myself down after that pick six at the end, but The Jaguars have really been coming together, and they look like a really strong team. They're rallying around Doug Peterson, and Trevor Lawrence is taking those next steps. And Tennessee seems to be regressing and not at a high level, and now losing Tannehill and having to rely on Malik Willis. It could be tough for the Titans to secure that AFC South Division title.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see Derrick Henry, take a beating from all of the runs he's had over the years, right? Where he's getting handed the ball so often. He's still had a pretty successful year, but just not quite. But you look at the Jags, and like you said, they're just finally starting to figure it out. And I think a lot of it has to do too with Travis Etienne kind of figuring it out as well. He's had some monster games down the stretch, but Trevor Lawrence is in a spot where he was so highly rated, like pretty much at first year he stepped on at Clemson as like a freshman, and he got tossed into some action. It's like everyone was wowed by this long-haired kid at Clemson. The next quarterback has the mobile, I think it was like a mobile version of like Peyton Manning is what he was labeled as. I remember there was so much pressure and so much hype around Trevor Lawrence, and then everyone's like, oh, he's not even good for the draft next year or the year after. So it's like, this is a guy we had to wait for, watch, and pretty much scrutinize and get on, which I think we are going to have a couple quarterbacks in the next little bit here, especially with Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers in Texas. We can get to that later, but very exciting. I love when you get to see these young quarterbacks in college and then judge them and see how good they're going to be in the NFL, because we know how smart we all are, Jake Locker. But I also just love the fact that we're getting to a spot now where the Jags are a team where they're stinky, right? It's like, all right, like how many Jags fans do you really know? I think our buddy Graham Creech is a Jags fan, but I like when you see teams do it the right way. And Urban Meyer was not the right guy. What'd they do? The Cons fired him basically right away.
Yeah.
Love that idea. You start to realize you have a bad apple. You don't write up the year. You don't ruin a young quarterback by just saddling him up there. And look, they went out, they brought in the Philly special, and they made sure that they brought in a good coach that was offensive minded, and they made sure that they surrounded him with pieces. They went out and they gave a lot of money to guys like Christian Kirk. And it's like, Zay Jones, who, he wouldn't be the biggest factor right now and why they were making the playoffs, but then they built to the offensive line, and they've just done it the right way. And Trevor Lawrence has stepped up and progressed, and you're seeing him win games in shootouts. And you bring up the Cowboys game, right? The pick six in overtime that I know you probably still have in your dreams, because the Cowboys are your second favorite team as well. But to see the way that they have actually done this, it's like they did it the right way, and it's like they're getting rewarded with it. Now, maybe it's the division not being very good either, and their slow start that's really hindering them a bit. But I don't believe that the Titans have enough to win out the rest of the year and overtake them for that position. So I am excited to see them make the playoffs, and obviously not have a very favorable matchup, but seeing, like, I guess the Jags come back to like, hey, we're a team that's good. You go back to the Blake Bortles, Leonard Fournette, I think it's 2016, 2017 era, when there was some hype around that sick defense and a real good offense, but mainly around those two guys. And it wasn't really Blake Bortles. It was more around Leonard Fournette. And it never really panned out after that 1 year. So now I just want to see a franchise, you see them every once in a while pop up that doesn't win a lot, normally kind of known as a joke. They get rewarded by, losing all those years by getting a guy like Trevor Lawrence and then actually winning and turning him into something and not a bust. I think that's what I'm curious to see. Not that, hey, they're world beaters yet, but they're trending in the right direction. So I am happy to see them take that division away from the Titans.
Yeah, and the thing with the Jaguars that I kind of hold on to is that concerns me a little bit, because they are trending in the right direction. I agree with you on that. And I think next season as well, depending on how his mental frame and mental state of mind, Calvin Ridley coming into that offense as well could be a legitimate wide receiver one for Trevor Lawrence. Because I don't see that. I don't see that in Christian Kirk. I know they have established some chemistry this season. But you mentioned some of the different offseason acquisitions as well. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with the Jaguars. I'm not confident in Trent Baalke being the guy to lead this Jaguars team to find the right players and build this team. And I'm just not confident in it at all. No. I like Doug Peterson as a coach, and I think he makes I think there are some times he gets a little bit too bold with his decision making and kind of overthinks. I like that. I like a bold decision every once in a while, but sometimes it really bites him in the ass. And I'm sure the players love it because, it instills confidence in your players that, yeah, we know you can get this done and all that. But I think there's a time and a place sometimes with some of Peterson's decision. Not saying that he should never go for it or anything like that, but sometimes he gets a little too bold.
Does he have like the ultimate, like, shut up, I'm allowed to be as bold as I want because they called the Philly special,
Sure.
took down Tom Brady in the Super Bowl with Nick Foles?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, does he have that trump card? Like, look
Probably.
at Nick Foles now. He can't even get the Colts under control. Like, that guy, talk about a fall from grace. Like,
yeah.
That game alone gave him so much hype. But either way, I feel you, maybe too bold, but I love the boldness because he does it. Like, it's right. You go through him and like Riverboat Ron Rivera, right? Yep. It's like you get that nickname because you stick to your guns because you're just always confident you're going to get it. And I kind of like that idea of it.
And that's fair. And look, I'm not saying he should never go for it, but sometimes, and I understand he's probably feeling the way for the Philly special, an illegal play, by the way. I just want to make that clear. That was an illegal play. As a Cowboys fan, I'm not bitter about that. That was such a hard Super Bowl to watch because it's like, it's either the Eagles win and you have to hear about it for the Eagles fans for years, or the Patriots win again. And, it's the Patriots at that time. But nonetheless, Jaguars trending in the right direction. I do want to see them in the playoffs. I think they could be a real fun team in the playoffs. And it's funny. We talked about the Jaguars and we not even mentioned Trayvon Walker once. He was the first overall pick this past year. We don't really hear that much about him in terms of on the field and whatever, but I really, it's just been Trevor Lawrence kind of taking over and being a key contributor in that offense. And this is a fun Jags team to watch. The Titans, meanwhile, it's looking rough for them. And I'm not confident in Malik Willis at this stage of his rookie season. Being put in a position to try and lead his team to a playoff spot and win the division. I mean, we've seen just from the performances from him, they may want Tannehill back, and you can't rely on Derrick Henry forever. So it could be tough for the Titans trying to reclaim the division.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. I just don't think that they're a team that's built right now for success. I feel like, I brought it up earlier, but, when you hand the ball off 675 times a season to Derrick Henry, it's eventually going to catch up to him. And I believe he's 29, 30. Like, he's in his later, days of his career. And this is a guy that not only that, but, he was leaned on heavily at Alabama for a good couple seasons that you just can't rely on him anymore. And the speed, the hits, the injuries are starting to catch up as he dealt with a foot injury all of last year. I'm curious to see if he's still dealing with that or if he's fully healthy and if something like that is ever, able to be, if he's able to ever overcome an injury like that, quite frankly. But you also look at that Titans defense and it just hasn't been the same. Mike Vrabel has done such a good job of motivating and putting that team in a good spot. And it just looks like they've taken a step back on defense, but also a couple steps back on offense. And Ryan Tannehill, we always thought, hey, this is a team that can build around, Derrick Henry. And what are they going to do when they go out and they signed Julio Jones and they had AJ Brown and Corey Davis was there right before he signed with the Jets. And it's like, okay, but then they traded away AJ Brown, who's, don't want to bring it up again because we're talking a lot about your not favorite team, the Eagles, but you look at trades that just didn't work out, and that's absolutely one of them. Traylon Burks was supposed to be a receiver out of Arkansas that was supposed to come in and take over for AJ Brown. He's dealt with injuries the majority of the year, but just hasn't lived up to the hype though. And Ryan Tannehill's been injured, but we've always seen that he wasn't the quarterback that was going to win them games when it mattered, when it came down to throwing the ball. So I look at that team as a very much a team where I wouldn't be surprised to see Mike Vrabel take a step back, and you see a couple of these teams where they get into these spots and they're tight for cap space. The team is built to win 2 years ago, and now it's stuck with terrible contracts. And now moving forward, what's their future? I look at that as a team in a situation where I wouldn't be surprised to see Mike Vrabel take a step back.
That's interesting.
That's a bold prediction for you.
I love it. Hey, I love the takes. Bring on the takes. And
shout out Doug Peterson for giving me that bold venom right there.
That's what it is. The Doug Peterson talk got you fired up. You're like, you know what? I got to be bold. I got to go for it. And there's the take right there. And it's funny, as we're talking about the Titans, I just got this little notice here that Derrick Henry listed as doubtful for the game against Dallas. So that is that could be tough if Derrick Henry's not playing, because I'll tell you what about the Cowboys quickly. There's a lot of things I like about this team. Run defense is not one of them. It's absolutely not one of them. And if they were facing off against Derrick Henry, even if he was injured, I would have been concerned. But that's looking a little bit more doubtful, I guess, in this case.
Are you not worried about Julius Chestnut?
No, not as much as Derrick Henry. You'd be shocked about that.
Hassan Haskins and Julius Chestnut, the second and third string. I don't have their practice roster, but Julius Chestnut sounds like a name you should watch out for.
That's right. It sounds like
because he's going to put up 220 yards against the Cowboys.
Of course,
you just know it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's any indication, that's what's going to happen. Julius Chestnut sounds like one of the football player names from the Key and Peele skit from a couple of years ago. I honestly thought that was a fake name. So there you go. Quickly looking at another division before we just kind of look at the teams on the bubble. It's really a battle between Cincinnati and Baltimore for the AFC North. Baltimore may be in a little bit of trouble without Lamar Jackson, but don't worry, they got Pro Bowl alternate Tyler Huntley waiting in the wings, ready to go to help lead this team to victory. Both these teams have clinched a playoff spot, so not really a concern for them in terms of making the playoffs, but certainly something to kind of keep an eye on in terms of home field advantage for both squads.
Yeah, and I was hoping that they would play each other one more time before the season ends. Oh, and they do. In the final game of the year, January 8th is, I believe, the game. Yeah, the Ravens play the Steelers this week, and then they play the Bengals to finish off their season. So that's where I believe that division is going to come down to. But the Bengals are a team that has been on an absolute tear, 7 in a row, hottest team in the NFL. Joe Burrow, as much as I'm a huge Bucs fan, I've absolutely loved him ever since he came at LSU. And it's hard to always be like, oh, I love the number one pick at quarterback. I remember when he was there and he was a 4th round draft pick, and, he was just nothing. But what he's done with that team, and Jamar Chase has been so good, even though he's missed half the year, he still just brings in double teams. But I think we've really seen how big T. Higgins is in that offense and leading the league in receiving with Jamar Chase out throughout the whole time he was out. And it's like, oh yeah, they've got another receiver there. That's like 2 number ones. And I did bring up the fact earlier that, we kind of live in an NFL era where it's offense. And it's like, you look at that team and how well they're built. Hayden Hurst, that tight end, the addition there, they went out and stole Alex Kappa, right guard, to solidify that offensive line. And they've done a good job of just kind of trying to help out, because I think it was he took like 9 sacks against the Rams in that, in the Super Bowl. But even the week before that, in the AFC Championship game, I believe he was sacked like 8 times every game in the playoffs. Like, he just always beat up. And you look at that rookie year where towards ACL, because his offensive line was absolutely atrocious, drafting Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell was another thing that they heard a lot about. But they're a team, again, that I think is built to win. I love Jesse Bates, that safety that they have. So I look at the Ravens as a team that has a record right now that doesn't live up to their record. And I think they've won some games when they needed to, but I am curious to see how healthy Lamar Jackson is when he comes back. I don't know about you. If you were to pick a team, I know this is maybe shifting the conversation a bit, friggin', but we're going to look at which team do you think has, I guess, which team's record do you believe in more, the Vikings or the Ravens?
Oh, that's a great question.
Because both teams in each conference are good, have a lot of talent, but I'm not buying their record.
Yeah. If you had to put a gun to my head, I'd probably say I'd believe in the Vikings record a little bit more.
Really?
Yeah. I and trust me, I've been one of those guys that even early on this season, I'm like, this smells like a fraud team right over here. This Vikings squad. But I look at the Ravens team and it's just like, the Ravens I find them way more frustrating, and if anything, they should have a better record than what they are because of the blown leads that they've had this year. But I find, at least with the Vikings, that even when things get a little dire, they are able to close out games and finish, and that's all you can really ask for a team. And so, and I believe in their talent a little bit more than the Ravens currently. And that's to say, like, I like the Ravens. I really like Harbaugh. But I if you were to put a gun in my head, I would say the Vikings right now. But I also say that fully well knowing it's the Vikings and they could find a way to just absolutely blow this up as we've seen in many decades with the Vikings. And so just quickly looking at the AFC North picture, let's give you a scenario here for this upcoming week. How about that? We don't have to worry about a Cincinnati Baltimore game to determine to win the division, because if Cincinnati wins and Baltimore loses this week, Cincinnati can claim the AFC North title. And of course, I know you love ties, so I will throw in the tie scenario as well. If Cincinnati ties and Baltimore loses, then Cincinnati can still clinch. So there's your tie scenario as well. And so just to kind of give a sense of the teams that both the Bengals and the Ravens are facing, the Bengals are facing off against the Buffalo Bills this week. So it could be tough for them to win the division. Could be a tough matchup for them. In the case of the Ravens, they've got the Steelers in a divisional matchup there. So you can never really say 100% like that's going to be a win when it comes to division rivalries, but it's certainly one of the better matchups for the Ravens, I believe. But quickly looking at the teams on the bubble in terms of who could make a playoff spot, we saw the Chargers clinch during the Monday night game. So there's still one playoff spot up for grabs. Here are the teams that are currently vying for a playoff spot. We got Miami. And there's a lot to talk about with Miami, especially with the Tua Tagovailoa news. Another concussion, and so Teddy Bridgewater is starting. The New England Patriots on the bubble, the Jets on the bubble. We talked about Tennessee earlier in terms of trying to secure a division spot with the Jaguars. The Pittsburgh Steelers are still in it. They're still in the hunt. They could maybe do something. And the Las Vegas Raiders, again, we mentioned Jarrett Stidham could lead the Vegas to the promised land and get this team into the playoffs. Of those collection of teams, who are you buying as the likely last playoff clincher of those teams?
Man, it's tough because the injury to Tua Tagovailoa really hurts that team. Not that I don't trust Teddy Bridgewater at all, but I don't. That offense has been so good and electric all year. They've done so much to build around him and put faith in a guy like Tua Tagovailoa that at times was rumored to be on the trading block, on the chopping block, right? Yeah. And now to see him come in and have the season he has, and dealing with the injuries, a scary video you see of him, with the concussion that I think we all could say was likely a concussion the first time. And then he played the short week, took a second concussion. Now he's being evaluated for another concussion. He's going to miss this weekend. You look at like those teams, they're sitting there at 8-7, but then you have the Patriots at 7-8. I think that is something where we're going to watch the Hoodie and Mac Jones sneak into the playoffs, even though they're terrible this year. And Mac Jones hasn't had a good year, but just here come the Patriots making the playoffs again. They're the only team I have, faith in, because I don't trust Teddy Bridgewater, as much as I like that offense. But, the Jets, I don't know, unless Mike White can get something going. I want to believe it's the Jets. I expected more from them. I'm not sure what's happening with Zach Wilson, but he's obviously on the way out there. I want the Jets to win that 7 spot, but I don't think they're going to do it. So I'm going to put my faith in the Hoodie, even though it kind of hurts to say something like that, because I look at all those teams and, I can go up and down, but, the Raiders, we've already discussed that, they're not doing that, especially with Jarrett Stidham. The Titans, not buying with Malik Willis unless he can go on a crazy one. Mike White, okay, I'd be pretty happy if they did, but, that defense and Robert Saleh, I like what they're doing, and it feels like they are a team that's like legit a quarterback away. You look at the Patriots, and it's just like Matt Patricia with his pencil in his hat and his terrible offensive play calling. Mac Jones has regressed quite substantially. The Patriots are just such a bland team right now. I don't know about you, but just, for them at 7-8, just outside the playoffs, it's like they're going to probably make it if I was to guess, but they're just such a, who are the Patriots? I don't know. They have no identity anymore, right? Yeah. Like they have zero identity. They have nothing sexy about them. There's nothing to get hyped about on that team. So I don't know. I just kind of sit there and it's like, but they're probably going to get in.
Yeah.
So that's who I put I guess I'd hitch my wagon to in that last playoff spot. Would you agree or disagree, or do you have a lot more faith in a guy like Malik Willis than I do?
I don't have faith in Malik Willis. I used to be a guy that would call Teddy Bridgewater Teddy Bridge quarterback. That's how I kind of viewed Bridgewater. I have a little more faith in him to win. I'll give you this because, again, we love these playoff scenarios, so we're going to throw this one out there. Miami could clinch this Sunday if they win, of course, and the Jets lose or tie. Or, and again, you love your ties, Miami ties, the Jets lose, and the Steelers lose or tie. So that's the scenarios there this week. So I look at Miami, they're facing off against those New England Patriots, and I think if they keep the offense simple enough, you rely on Tyreek Hill. I'm talking about the Dolphins. You rely on Tyreek Hill. You rely on Jalen Waddle. You don't overthink it. You get Jeff Wilson going on the offensive side of the ball, and the defense can stand their ground enough against a weak Patriots offense, as you mentioned with Mac Jones and a collection of receivers that are on the team.
Good way to put it.
And Ramondre Stevenson. If they're able to keep them contained, I think Miami does stand a chance to make the playoffs and can clinch on Sunday. I'm not too crazy confident on the Patriots. I know it's Belichick, and we talk about Brady magic sometimes, but I feel like there could be some Belichick magic all of a sudden. They somehow get themselves into a playoff spot. My heart wants to say the Jets, especially that defense. I want to see them play. I want to see how the Sauce does in the playoffs, and I want to see it. I want to see Mike White, Dallas Cowboys draft pick Mike White, by the way, play in the playoffs. I want to see that. But I'm confident enough in Miami. I think Bridgewater is a good enough quarterback that they could get by and make the playoffs with. So I'll stick with Miami, and let it be known that Miami has been somewhat of a kryptonite for New England in the regular season in years past. So I could see that happen.
The only problem with that, and I want to believe it, is the fact that the game is in Foxborough. If it was in Miami, I would say you could put the money down that they're going to lose. Mm-hmm. But, you look at both these teams that have struggled a lot lately, and you look at the Patriots, they've lost 4 of the last 5 games. They have not been good. They've played some big teams in there, but they've also lost to some bad teams. Like they lost a tight game to the Vikings, lost to the Bills in a very random game, but they beat the Cardinals, they lost to the Raiders, then they lost to the Bengals. Now they got the Dolphins and the Bills to finish off. Look at the Dolphins, and that's a team that right before they've lost 4 in a row, they had won 5 games in a row. So this is a team that has been really hot and cold, starting the year with 3 wins, then 3 losses. So they went from 3-0 to 3-3. And then all of a sudden, here comes 5 more wins. So they're up to 8-3. Oh, and then by the way, they've lost now 4 in a row, and now they're 8-7. So it's like, okay, who are they? And clearly this team revolves around Tua Tagovailoa. Like I said, tough to see the injuries, but I look at that Patriots team as a team that's like, man, they're just not good. And if they can sneak in, which I think they will, because this game in Foxborough at 1:00 on Sunday is going to be what puts them into the playoffs. I truly believe it.
No Steelers run. You don't envision Mike Tomlin being this incredible coach once again. We got to see Mitch Trubisky in the playoffs,
man, I don't. But you know what I think they might pull off is, I have to double check if this is even possible currently, is if they can get back to 9-8, which they can, because they're 7-8. So that way he wins. He has another season where he's above 500, right? That's his record. I think he's got going on right now. But I think Kenny Pickett's okay. I like what that team is doing, but I'm not fully sold on them. I like Pickens though. George Pickens is a solid receiver that I think is underrated. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm not fully bought into Kenny Pickett as a number 1 quarterback in the NFL. I don't see it fully. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's the offensive line. Maybe it's Matt Canada, who you'd think he would. I don't want to ever crap on anything that's named Canada, but he hasn't been a very good offensive coordinator with the Steelers and what they've been dealing with and what they set themselves up for. And yes, they got TJ Watt back, and he's been, getting, healthy. So that's one thing, but it's still, to come back from a torn pec is serious. I have more faith in Mike White and the Jets getting things done and grinding out a playoff spot than I do the Steelers. But I still am going to just take the safe pick with the Patriots.
Yeah.
Give me some Mike White.
Oh, I'd love to see Mike White. I want to see him in that dude's a baller, man. He wanted to play. He was trying to find 10 different doctors. Yeah, I'd love it. Get him out on the field. I'm sure Garrett Wilson agrees with that sentiment as well. Get him on the field. I want to get some targets from him.
But sounds like the whole team wants him, and that's what's very impressive, because you look at, what that team did to bring in Zach Wilson and that second overall pick, but just they went out Garrett Wilson. Like you said, they've signed Corey Davis a couple of years ago, who has been a very good, I think number 3. He never turned into being the number 1 receiver that a lot of people thought he would be in Tennessee, and then being with the Jets. But, you go through that team and the offense and what they've done to build, again, on offense and defense. It's like they're due for a playoff win, due for a playoff seeding. So I hope they do. I really hope they do.
Yeah, same here. All right, let's look at the NFC. I wish I could just heap so much praise of the Cowboys all segment long, but I can't do that. But I do want to quickly talk about the NFC East, because yes, the Cowboys beat the Eagles. I don't want to hear about the Cowboys being a backup quarterback. I don't want to hear it, because the Eagles beat the Cowboys backup quarterback in Cooper Rush. So I feel like that's equal now. So I don't want to hear that. And plus, I believe Gardner Minshew is a number 1 quarterback on other teams. So I don't think that's a controversial statement on my part. Maybe that's a bold take. Maybe that's the Doug Peterson effect wearing off on me. Former Jacksonville Jaguar Gardner Minshew anyway. But the NFC East is still up for grabs. Really, it's between Dallas and Philly. Dallas has to win out to even have a chance, and Philly has to lose. And it sounds like they're going to try and get Jalen Hurts for at least one game to try and win so that they can secure the NFC East. But hey, both teams have made the playoffs, and it's going to be interesting to see whichever team doesn't win the division of the NFC East, because they will more than likely be the top non-division winner, and they'll have to face off against the winner of the NFC South. And currently, as it stands, it could be Cowboys, it could be Buccaneers in the wild card. I don't know if we would be able to communicate with each other, Bunda. I think we may have to go dark. We may not even speak to each other again. But I mean,
you're talking about me and you not talking to Lee?
Yeah, of course. That's right, because I'm a big Bucs fan. Of course.
Big Bucs fan.
Big Bucs fan, Zach McGibbon. But no, the NFC South, I mean, it is the worst division in football. It is bad. It's just a wretched division that should not exist at this season. There are other teams that probably deserve to come in, but nonetheless, the Bucs currently occupy that spot. Just tell me what went wrong. Why is this division so bad? You know this division better than anybody. Like, what's going on with the NFC South?
Sorry, my mom's calling me. I gotta go. Maybe next time we could talk about the Bucs and how terrible their year has been.
Oh boy,
man! I look at the situation, and I started off the show by getting in on we so often see teams target offensive coordinators of good quarterbacks and situations. And Byron Leftwich and Todd Bowles have been, I guess, the coordinators and have worked with Bruce Arians for quite some time, back to Arizona days. But, the last couple of years with the Bucs, and they really put themselves in a great position. Byron Leftwich, especially, as this next offensive-minded coordinator that's going to be a head coach. And right before Doug Peterson went there was a lot of rumors that the deal was done and that, Byron Leftwich was going to be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it didn't work out because he didn't want to work with the owner, and he ended up staying in Tampa. I only wish the Jags just took him because I've seen Tom Brady go from a MVP quarterback to a guy that is just dealing with the worst play calls in the history of the NFL, like the history of the NFL. It's been awful that a team with a very injured and terrible offensive line this year, for the majority of it, want to run the ball so much. And it bothers me. You look at the division up and down. I can believe that anybody other than the Bucs, nobody really believed would have a lot of success this year. You look at Atlanta. I never really thought they'd do much. The Saints, man, they've chosen Andy Dalton over Jameis Winston at times this year and Taysom Hill. So that just goes to show what the heck is going on with Dennis Allen and the stupid New Orleans Saints. Not that I don't like them, but I don't. And then you look at Carolina, and I had a bit more hope and faith in that team, mainly because, once upon a time, Baker Mayfield was traded there. And there was some hype around that team and some of the receivers. DJ Moore, I think, is one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL, and hate it because he's in the NFC South. But I actually think that he's a very solid number one receiver that doesn't get enough credit. But you look at what they went through a quarterback, and I think you called Teddy Bridge quarterback, which I believe is what happened in that situation. But to see them go with Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, who was an XFL star at one point. They fired their head coach, Matt Rule. I believe he was the first head coach that got fired in the NFL this year. There was a lot of hype around him coming out of Baylor and his offense. Again, offensive-minded quarterbacks, offensive-minded coaches. But Matt Rule never panned out. And a lot of people predicted him to be that next coach in the NFL, not just based on how he likes to run an offense, but how smart, how well he was football-wise. And, I was kind of surprised to see them be that terrible. So I look at this situation as why the Bucs have been so bad. And we do need 3 hours because they can go up and down. But I believe it's because we're now seeing Todd Bowles, who is a defensive coordinator, defensive-minded coach, play so reserved. You want to talk about being bold. This is a guy that goes punts the ball on the opponent's 38-yard line on 4th and 1. And you're down by 7 with 10 minutes to go in the football game. And it's like he uses every opportunity to not go for it, but then goes for it with fake punts on his own 38. And it's like, what are you doing again against the Bengals? Like, there's been so much collapse. And I look at a lot of it as starting, number one, the injuries to the offensive line has hurt the Bucs completely. Tom Brady's a pocket passer. The NFL is very much, you don't see pocket passers anymore. They're almost non-extinct. They're extinct. They're gone. They're not existent. It's not something you can really thrive on unless you have an offensive line like the Buccaneers did previous years. Well, what happened? Their left guard retired. He was just, tired of playing football. Ali Marpet wanted to retire off a Pro Bowl year. Sure. Brian Jensen, Pro Bowl center, injured first week of camp, basically. He has entered the injury 21 days to practice. Maybe he could play. I don't totally buy it, but it gave me a little bit of excitement when I woke up this morning. Never thought I'd be super excited, friggin', about a center getting healthy and maybe bringing some hype around Tom Brady and the Bucs. But it is that nasty attitude that they're missing. And, we look at Tom Brady and how he's throwing tablets. He's grumpy. He's mad. He's getting hit every second play because they can't protect him at all. Their left guard that they started to replace, Luke Gedeke, was a rookie right tackle through a Division II school. And you put him in at right guard, a new position, and it just failed. There was so much fail. But the big thing I see is Bruce Arians was never afraid to call anybody out, always wanted to go for it. I brought up offensive nickname coaches. No risk it, no biscuit. That's what Bruce Arians lived by. But he would call Tom Brady out after games. He would do everything. He'd get in his players' faces. He would bench guys. Bruce Arians was the heart and soul of that team. And now when it's just Tom Brady, and you got Todd Bowles standing there looking over, like pondering if he wants to have a hot dog after the game or if he wants to, maybe watch game film. And Byron Leftwich, who's just trying to feed the run, and you get caught wanting to be a running team. I feel like I've ranted for like 11 minutes here, so I hope you have a timer going on. But when you want to be a running football team, you need to do it when you have a lead, not to start the game, fall behind. Like, I think Tom Brady, everyone's like, oh, the Bucs pass a lot. Why do everyone say they run so much? Because you look and watch their games in the first quarter, the second quarter is their first down run up the middle. Something it's not creative, and it's just so frustrating to see a team that averaged like 30 points a game for the last couple of years barely get to average 16 points a game this year. And to see Tom Brady at the age of 45, I still think that his arm is good. I think he has taken a step back a bit, but I also want to kind of look at that as, their offensive line has been terrible. He's got a case of the yips. He's afraid to get hit because he gets clocked every second play. So I look at it in a sense of the whole division has been terrible. Most of it expected. I didn't expect the Bucs to be this terrible. I don't think anyone would have. I didn't think anyone would have seen them go this far down. And then, you chalk up the Tom Brady personal life and all that. There's a lot that happened in Tampa this year, but I ultimately hang my hat with this team is not very good because of the coaching staff that's set in place, because of Bruce Arians stepping aside, letting his assistants get in there, and it just hasn't worked out.
I think that's fair. You had a lot to say there, Mr. Hunter.
I could go on for 30 minutes. I swear to God.
you were breaking it down. I thought we were going to go like position by position. Here's what's wrong with the defensive backs. Here's what's wrong with the defensive line. Here's what's wrong with the offensive line. That could have been 2 hours in of itself. I had the misfortune of watching the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Arizona Cardinals full game this past Sunday night. And what I noticed right away was that I could tell that Brady was not really comfortable throwing it too far because, as you mentioned, there was a lot of running plays, and they kept alternating between Rashad White and Leonard Fournette, which just was like, well, Fournette's the one that's actually getting you plays. Like, put Fournette in there a little bit more. And one of the things I also noticed as well is, like, whenever Brady would go back to pass, he would always dump it off to Fournette. Always. Whenever Fournette was open, he would always just go for Fournette. And it drove me insane because I was in a fantasy football championship, and the one remaining player that my opponent had was Leonard Fournette, and I was a little terrified at the end that I was going to lose my fantasy football championship because of him. But nonetheless, you could tell that there's something off with the Buccaneers, and I still think they're going to win the division, all things considered. Carolina's like they're starting to figure a little bit more. Steve Wilkes has surprised me as head coach. I thought, boy, you're bringing in Steve Wilkes to be the head coach. Things are not going to be good for Carolina. And Sam Darnold's the quarterback. But Deonta Foreman's looking good. Chuba Hubbard is looking good. And Darnold's not terrible. Like, he's passable. I think he's fine. Could be better. Could be much worse. But I still think it's the Bucs division to win. Not saying that, of course, as a big Bucs fan. But I just see in terms of like they're facing off against the Panthers this upcoming NFL week. That's going to be a big game in terms of determining a division winner. I'm just going to make sure that. So if Tampa Bay wins that game, they win the NFC South division. We don't have to talk about the rest of this stinky division afterwards. So please win, for the love of God. Please get your team to win so we don't have to talk about the NFC South anymore. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. I don't see much of the Saints. I like Chris Olave. He was like really high up on of the wide receivers that were drafted this year. He was probably my top receiver, right there with Garrett Wilson. And so I think there's something there with the Saints. It's just I don't know if Dennis Allen is the right guy there, and
no.
Just continuing on with the Taysom Hill stuff, and I think they got to find a much better quarterback. There's just a lot there with the Saints that I think they got to work on. So really, to me, it's between the Panthers and the Bucs, and I just see the Bucs winning this game and winning their division this Sunday. And so just kind of looking at everything else, because there's still a few playoff spots open, currently occupied by the rest of the NFC East, or as it's called for some, the NFC Beast. What a beastly division it is this year. Not expecting that at all.
From the NFC least to the NFC beast.
That's right. Moving on up.
Things can change.
Right? That's what makes the NFL so great. But can Washington really clinch their playoff spot with Carson Wentz as the starting quarterback? Do you feel confident that could be the case?
No, I don't. I feel like that spot is sitting there for the Packers or the Lions. And I'm not sure who is going to. I love this little race right here. Yeah. I guess that Seattle is the first out right now, winning all these head-to-heads. But I think that Seattle is a team where I'm not really sold on. But I kind of think the Lions. And hey, I'm pretty sure I told you earlier the Lions aren't a fake. But that was at the beginning of the year before the season has even started.
Yep.
So hey. But the Packers sitting there at 7-8, I'm not sold on them. I don't really see them, going down a bit of a tear right now. But I look at that Lions team, not because I picked them, but because I think that they have a little bit of that momentum right now. And I know that they didn't have a great game over the weekend when they needed a win. But I look at Carson Wentz and I say no. I say no.
just straight up no. No analysis there. You're just nope. I mean, to me, Taylor Heineke is what got them into this playoff conversation
Right?
in the first place. So stick with Heineke. You know, I know he's not been great, but it's like there's a reason you guys are in consideration for a playoff spot right now. So
They have a playoff spot.
right, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so it's like, now as a Cowboys fan, I think it's a great move for them to start Carson Wentz. I mean, just a tremendous move. They should have had him start play all the games this season as a Cowboys fan. But as just an NFL fan itself, I think you just stick with Heineke. I'm sure Terry McLaurin is somewhere freaking out about, you know, Carson Wentz starting because he doesn't get the ball thrown to him from Wentz. It's more Heineke because Heineke realizes, hey, I should probably throw to the talented receiver that can catch the ball. But let's take a look at some scenarios here because you mentioned some of the teams there. Seattle also in the mix as well to try and clinch. We can also, Seattle, Detroit, Green Bay somehow still in conversation to clinch. So good for them. Let's take a look at the scenario here. So the Giants can win in 7 different ways. They can clinch the playoffs in 7 different ways. Are you ready for this, Bunda?
I've got my notepad ready to go, friggin'.
So here's a very simple one. The Giants win, they're in. Nothing else, no other losses, they're in. Let's go through the ties. Because, hey, they tied once. They could certainly tie again. So if the Giants tie, Seattle loses, or Washington loses, or Detroit loses or ties, or Detroit loses or ties, or Green Bay loses or ties, then they're in. So that's a scenario. Or if the Giants lose, but Seattle loses and Washington loses, or Seattle loses, Detroit loses, and Green Bay loses or ties, then they get in. Or Washington loses, Detroit loses, and Green Bay loses, and the Giants are in. So that's 7 different ways they can get in. I think it's safe to say the Giants are getting in. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I believe the Giants are getting in. I look at the Commanders as the team that everybody is targeting can crumble.
Yeah.
But the way I look at this situation, did they start Carson Wentz because they play the Browns this week? And if they lose or he plays the crap against the Browns, do they say, well, we're trotting Tyler Heineke out for that final weekend game because their playoff lives are on the line, and here comes Heineke again? Like, they're flip-flopping here for when Carson Wentz, Heineke. Now, you know, there's a lot going on, but I look at that team and they're playing the Browns, and it's like, I know that this isn't the Browns from, 4 or 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago or whatever it is. And now they have Deshaun Watson, who's that back there and hasn't been very good, but obviously a lot more of a threat with him at quarterback than anybody else that they've ever had rostered this season at quarterback. But you look at that Washington Commanders team starting Carson Wentz this weekend against the Browns, and it's like, what happens if they lose this game? Are they going to ride out the rest of the season on Carson Wentz when, like you said, Tyler Heineke, like the guy that put him in a playoff spot? Yeah, you know what? We'll just pull him. I don't buy it. Yeah. I look at the Lions as a team right now. I believe they play the Packers at one more point at the end of the year, so that's going to be their gimme game they need to do. And I look at the Packers and they play the Vikings and then the Lions, so it's going to be tough for them. I've yet to check out Seattle, so I'm not sure if you have that there, but
I do.
What do they have left?
Seattle, they've got the Jets, and I just lost their last opponent here, but they've got the Jets coming up, and so that could be tough for them. And then they've got the Rams to finish off their season. So it's possible. It's possible that they could get in.
But we want Mike White to take them down. So I'd much rather that the Jets and Mike White get into the playoffs than the friggin' Commanders or the Seahawks. So let's plus the Commanders. I just hate that name. It's just such a weird name. Give me back the Washington football team.
Yes.
Commanders.
That's right. The Commanders.
Yeah.
What a name. They tried a bunch of different. They were looking at a bunch of different names that were much better that they couldn't secure.
They had like the soft pitches right on Twitter with and be like, oh, they're leaning towards these 2 names, and it was like, I can't remember who it was and like what the 2 names were, and it was like they were brutal. And it's like, oh, actually, we're just gonna go with football team, and then all of a sudden it's like, after a year, it's like, or was it a year or 2 years? I can't remember. I think it was 2 seasons they were as Washington football team. And they're like, well, you know what? Let's try out the Commanders and spend more money on merchandise and everything. Talk about ridiculous franchises and has no idea what the heck is going on. Washington, certainly one of them. like I said, I'd much rather Mike White get in and just disrupt the Seahawks and their playoff bid.
Totally. I do like being able to call the Washington Commanders the commies. I do enjoy saying that. I like doing a Commanders versus Patriots, instead doing the commies versus the Patriots, and see how that goes. But just kind of looking at the rest of the NFC playoff picture, Washington can also clinch this week. If they win, Seattle loses, Detroit loses, and Green Bay loses or ties. So they can clinch, and it could be this week. So we'll keep an eye on that. Carson Wentz, playoff hero. Carson Wentz coming in to save the day for the Commanders. And so that's the playoff picture in the NFL as it stands. Looking forward to it. It's really shaping up to be something. The last couple of weeks, still a lot of teams in the mix. It's something to kind of keep an eye on. And hey, you never know. There could be that one team that absolutely crumbles. I think back to the Colts last year with the Jaguars. Or not last year, a couple years before that, I should say. But that was a fun time. And so anything could happen. Anything could happen to the NFL is what we've learned in the last couple of years. So let's move off from the NFL. We're going to finish up the show with a look at the college bowl games. We haven't done some college football talk in a while. And this is why I have you on here as well, Bunda, because I know you are a master and expert of college football. If I believe you're a master and expert of college football, so that's why you're on. A lot of interesting games coming up, obviously, looking at the college football playoff as well. Michigan and TCU, Georgia and Ohio State, Fiesta Bowl and the Peach Bowl coming up on Saturday. But there are a couple other bowl games going on. In fact, we're in the middle of some bowl games right now. Any other games that kind of catch your eye that people should look out for, and other bowls that maybe not with playoff implications, but still should be a fun game, especially considering we've seen some players now. We're hearing, we're seeing more players announce their commitment to the NFL draft, and so they're not going to play in the bowl games. Is there any bowl games to really kind of check out other than the playoff ones?
You know what? I think there's one you could watch today, and this is why I like college football. But you have the San Diego County Credit Union Holiday Bowl at 8:00 tonight. And the reason I bring that up is because Drake May, the quarterback for North Carolina, they're taking on Oregon with Bo Nix, who's returning to Oregon for another year. But Drake May is a highly rated quarterback in the next year's draft of solid quarterbacks that I want to kind of watch, see how good he is in a big game, and see how he can, push UNC next season. So that's just one today I'll throw out there, just because, as I brought up the schedule, that's the big one. Obviously, the college football playoff is very exciting, but I think that we know what's going to happen, and it's probably going to end up being Ohio State versus Michigan, or we're going to see Georgia sneak in. I feel like we could see an upset, though. Like I'm not high on TCU, but I do like the TCU magic, and it's probably because you're a wrestling guy, so I'm not sure. Have you heard of Hacksaw Jim Duggan?
Of course I know Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Of course I do.
Well, it's good to see. I think it's his nephew, Max Duggan. He's up for the Heisman, but he's right there at the TCU Horned Frogs. I know you like the Horned Frogs a lot, but I'm not sure they're really going to be able to compete in that. I think it's going to come down to 3 teams, and I don't know why, but I feel like there should be an upset in there somewhere. Is there one? I don't know. Ohio State, are they going to win because, CJ Stroud, they didn't have a very good Big Ten championship game against the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan, though, are they going to be able to get it done? There's going to be a lot there that I'm excited for. But for me, it sucks because a lot of bowl season, the guys you go and watch, a lot of them, if it's not the college football playoff, they kind of set their eyes on the draft now. They don't want to get hurt, especially if they're, top 2 prospects in the first 2 rounds. They usually kind of bow out of it. So it does suck. So that's why I look at and I bring up the game. I can't remember if you remember the whole sponsor name, but Oregon versus North Carolina. And I look at that as a good quarterback matchup, but also, hey, Drake May going up against Oregon, it's, not highly ranked, but, it's a 9-3 football team, and Oregon and Bo Nix, like, they were expected to have a much better year this year. That's a good team, and that's going to be a good game. So those are the kind of games I like to watch. As I look through a couple more, Texas Tech, Ole Miss, I will not be staying up late for in the Tax Act Texas Bowl. I'll promise you that.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm just looking at a couple of the bowl, other bowl games here as well. Are you not going to look at the Alamo Bowl between Washington and Texas? See some Quinn Ewers action?
The only reason I might not is because I'll be too busy and bored, or after the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl.
Ooh,
or
right.
I can't believe how I missed this one. Oklahoma, Florida State in the Cheez-It Bowl. Please tell me you saw the Cheez-It rooms.
I have not seen the Cheez-It rooms. No.
Do yourself a favor and Google the Cheez-It room. And you will see why it is so significant, because the Cheez-It Bowl, sponsored by Cheez-It, crackers,
see.
Crackers, built rooms for some of the star players to stay in that are just ridiculous, but also hilarious.
I'm just seeing it now. Oh my God.
I'm not making it up as much as I like to try and bug you about certain things. No, but you do look at that game, the Valero Alamo Bowl. Michael Penix Jr., also a guy that, teams are looking at as a top quarterback. But Quinn Ewers, that's a situation where I look at Texas and they have hopes of joining the SEC in the next, couple of years here, but they're looking at two top quarterback prospects. Quinn Ewers, one of the biggest quarterback prospects and exciting quarterbacks in college football, I guess, coming right out of high school. It lasts a while because of his sidearm, because he's crazy. He was at Ohio State for a little bit, and then now he came to Texas this year. But now they got Archie Manning, who's hanging out there as well. And how long does he want to sit there and watch for? I think that you could see one of these two quarterbacks transfer. Please come to Notre Dame. But that's like Michael Penix Jr. for Washington, the quarterback there. He's got some eyes on him for, is he capable of playing big at the next level? A very underrated quarterback is what I see, and a very underrated Washington team who is 10-2 heading into that game. Other than that, I look around at a couple more bowl games, and we have the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, Notre Dame versus South Carolina Gamecocks. Spencer Rattler, who I don't like at all, but Notre Dame, huge fan, and that's why we say F South Carolina, F the Cocks. Too bad, South Carolina. Big game, though. That's going to be on Friday. I'll be watching that. So go through a couple more. Tennessee, Clemson doesn't have that appeal in the Orange Bowl because Hendon Hooker won't be there. Yeah. And then you get to your New Year's Eve games. Alabama, Kansas State. Not buying it. I don't know about you. Does that really intrigue you?
No, not really. I mean, if I was a Crimson Tide fan and I was feeling left out on not winning this year, maybe I could feel better by knowing that I could win the Sugar Bowl. Well, I don't know what the sponsor is. I unfortunately don't have a list of sponsors.
Come on, how do you not know these?
It's the All-State Sugar Bowl. That's right. I only have the bowl names. They don't, which is shocking because I'm on the NCAA website, and you would think the NCAA would put the sponsors of those bowl games on their website. Really,
I could promise you though, no Alabama fan is watching that game because Alabama fans are all about college football playoffs or bust.
That's right.
So they're still sour that they got to play the friggin' Kansas State Wildcats, I believe they are.
Yes.
But either way, then right after that game, or no, they're kicking off at the same time. Pick which game you'd rather watch: Iowa, Kentucky, in the TransPerfect Music City Bowl. Feeling that?
I'm certainly thinking about it. I don't know if I'm feeling it, but it's certainly on my mind. It is certainly a bowl game that's happening that day. I'm looking through the bowl games, and you know what really shocks me? That in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, that's it's North Carolina State versus Maryland. I mean, why isn't Will Levis not playing in this game? I mean, I know it's Kentucky, but I feel like that bowl was made for him to play in, and he's not there.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a guy too where I'm curious to see more of Will Levis because there is still that hype and Josh Allen comparison that I'm still seeing. I unfortunately am still reading a lot of mock drafts because I somewhat believe that the Bucs could mess up their playoff potential, but that Will Levis is still a quarterback coming off the board before guys like Bryce Young, and I'm like, I
don't see
interesting. No, I don't either. And maybe it's I've seen product of the environment, not with enough 5-star athletes and yada. I've heard every excuse, but intangibles, build. He's got that Josh Allen big body type that can sling it and uses his legs. I'm with you. I'm not sold on it. I'm not even sure that watching the TransPerfect Music City Bowl against Iowa is going to be something that would sell me on it either. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I just like, I watched him against I believe it was Ole Miss, and I was like, all right, everybody, even the broadcast was hyping him up, being like, they've got him going up ahead of guys like Bryce Young and blah blah. I was like, wow, all right, well, I'm excited to see how he plays, and let's see how he does. And I was like, I was more impressed with their running back than I was with their quarterback. I was like, there's some decisions that he made that's like, oh, well, I could see the arm, but I didn't really see like a smart QB in the pocket, like making smart decisions. Like, I would understand the argument of, the environment around him, if he was making these smart decisions and good decisions and a nice thrown ball, but then the guy just blatantly drops it. But there was none of that game. And Ole Miss wasn't necessarily like, they were a ranked team at that time, and I believe they still are. But it's not like they were going to be playing for, a college football playoff either. So I don't know. I just don't see it with Will Levis. I don't. I'm sure. I'm just waiting for like similar to Zach Wilson, where he just has this unbelievable combine. He has that one throw that everybody talks about, and like, oh, we found him. We found the guy. This is our guy, and then just doesn't really translate. But I'm still waiting on it. With Will Levis, but. Yeah, I will definitely be checking out the Fiesta Bowl. Again, I don't have the sponsorship in front of me, so we're not getting paid for the sponsors anyway. So the
Turbo Fiesta Bowl.
There you go. So the check is in the mail, I guess. Hopefully, from these sponsors for mentioning their sponsorship of these bowl games. But I think these should be fun. I am going to cheer for TCU to try and pull off some magic, but. I was not a fan. I was shocked that Sonny Dykes won Coach of the Year. I understood why he won Coach of the Year, but that game where not relying on Duggan enough, I know he was like practically out of breath nearing the end, but I was just like, what are we doing here against Kansas State? I was like, why aren't you relying on Max Duggan? And this situation, it's brought you to the dance. Anyways, that's a whole thing of itself. But no, it should be some fun games. I hope TCU at least brings it. I'm looking at some of the other games here, and to be honest, like the Gamecocks versus the Fighting Irish Gator Bowl there, that looks like a game I'll probably try and tune in for on Friday, I should say. And then I am a Texas guy, not like hardcore like a Cowboys fan, but I do follow Texas, which I feel like is just like self-sabotage on my part at this point with Texas teams, but I'll check out the Alamo Bowl. I'm interested. I think Hudson Card transferred, right? Like he was another guy that was in that rotation. I think Hudson Card transferred out, so now it's just Ewers and obviously Arch Manning that's coming in. So we'll see on that. So we'll keep an eye on some of these bowl games. You never know. We'll put something on and then maybe watch it, and then I'm looking as well. Maybe a little bit later. There's after New Year's, we've got USC versus Tulane in the Cotton Bowl. What's the sponsorship there for that one?
Goodyear.
The Goodyear Cotton Bowl. Okay. And, the Rose Bowl, Utah versus Penn State could be fun. What's the sponsorship for the Rose Bowl, or is it just the Rose Bowl?
Rose Bowl game presented by Prudential.
Oh, there you go. Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you for filling in the blanks on this. I feel really bad not living up to the deep legacy of these bowl games by not mentioning the sponsors. But it should be interesting. And obviously, I'll admit, even with the Cowboys going in the playoffs, I've still been looking at some mock drafts, just kind of keeping an eye on players and just because draft season is always a fun time. I don't know how the NFL does it, making me watch players work out and get a sense of how they will be as future NFL stars. But they got me. King. They are. I mean, we saw that as well with the Sunday ticket deal with YouTube TV. They're making billions of dollars hand over fists. Is just they're a money making league. They are the king of sports, at least in North America. So it's something else. But that's a look at the bowl games. Anything else you wanted to add before we start to wrap things up?
I just want to go on the record and state that I do believe the Buccaneers will make the playoffs and could have that one game that will maybe put their offense into more of a groove and they'll figure it out. I hold out hope that they were just messing around all year to screw teams off their game plans, and then they come on hot in the playoffs and it's like, who the hell are these guys? Two, we're never ever gonna like not text each other because of a football game. We work too closely on our wrestling podcast together. That's why you have your book of lists that I found in your drawer back at the station. So even if the Cowboys and the Bucs play each other in the playoffs, which they will, because the Bucs are winning the NFC South, we'll still talk, because how else would you get any Hulk Hogan news or information that day? And finally, thanks again for having me on your podcast. It's fun being on a podcast with you and not just being in charge of a podcast that you're part of. And this is wrestling.
That's right. Yeah, you get a whole bunch of responsibility off your shoulders. You could just talk with me. You don't have to worry about business or anything like that when it comes to running the wrestling side of things. It's always fun chatting with you. And talking football and wrestling. And yes, I do. It is very true. I get the texts all the time. It's a new Hulk Hogan gif or picture or something. Or, I get something about another karaoke night going on at Hogan's beach club there. One day, you and I, Bunda, we're going to head down to the great state of Florida. And we're going to sing with the Nasty Boys and Hogan, and maybe Brutus Beefcake and Jimmy Hart will be there as well. And it'll be
maybe Nate will be there.
Oh God, maybe Nate will be there. He'll have his documentary up there as well. Maybe.
But can we make sure that like Nick Hogan, who is like trying to be Hulk Hogan 2.0 in these videos where he's flexing, and he's got the deep Hogan voice, and it's like, what are you doing? Like you never even wrestled, but now you're trying to be your dad because you're trying to get this karaoke going on. Relax.
Yeah. Well,
Nick Hogan.
Yeah. In more ways than one when it comes to Nick Hogan, but nonetheless. No, it's always good to chat with you. Hopefully your Christmas was good. We're recording this a couple days after Christmas, the holidays. Anything big for you, or was it just kind of a quiet affair?
I'm not sure if you noticed, but the Buccaneers beat the Cardinals in overtime on Christmas night. So I feel like the big guy, Santa, that was his gift to me, was to, one, tick me off for, I don't know, 3/4 of the game, but also to give me an overtime win against a terrible Cardinals team with Trace McSorley at quarterback. So that was my big gift. But no, it was a good couple days. I was off, so I enjoyed it. Spent some time with my family. Had a couple drinks here and there. Enjoyed the Christmas time, and now I'm back to work for a couple days before I get a couple more days off. So it was solid for me. Did you have a good Christmas, friggin' McGibbon?
I did. I was actually in Ottawa for a couple of days last week. I was
funny. My phone was silent, actually. So.
I know. I was in Wednesday night and came back to Belleville Monday night, but I was mostly with family during that time. And so, hey, look, I told Andy I was in during those days, and he did not saw the DM once.
So you're gonna blame Andy?
Yes, I am. I'm totally going to blame Andy on this one. He asked me, he said, hey, are you in Ottawa for the Christmas holidays? I said, yeah, here are the dates. What I got? Nothing. No response back from Andy. No word being passed around. It's unbelievable. Read
Andy's
your
a busy
DMs.
man. Andy's a Disney man. I'm not allowed to ever get mad at Andy because he's pretty cool. One, and I'm working with him all week. So when I have my executive meeting and he has to be a part of it tomorrow morning, I'll say absolutely, as the biggest fan of This Is Wrestling, come on in here. We're going to have an executive meeting and talk about Zach and him throwing you under the bus completely.
I may have done that more than once on a podcast, throwing Andy under the bus, but that's a different thing. But anyways, hopefully you bring good news to the executives meeting. You tell Samantha Pope, you tell Chris Holsky that this podcast is doing fantastic, and nothing needs to be changed. No title changes, no host changes, no location changes, nothing. We're on a good path here with the football podcast. So hopefully you can bring that to the executives, and please let Sam know that the Denver Broncos stink. Like they just stink.
Their second favorite team. Got it.
That's right. That's right. Nonetheless, that's it for us here. Thanks again, Steve, for coming on. This is the last episode of Gibby's Football Podcast for 2022. So we'll see you in 2023.